This content is brought to you in part by Supreme Auctions, the only luxury auction company recommended by the Institute. Supreme Auctions is widely recognized as the first auction company to design a program to work alongside and in partnership with luxury real estate professionals and their clients. Go to supremeauctions.com to learn more. Welcome to A State of Mind, a podcast series all about motivating, inspiring, and educating you in the art of selling luxury real estate. My name is Diane Hartley, and I'm the president of the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. Today, we have two very special guests. First, we have Lori Pedersen. Lori is based out of Toronto, Canada, and she is the first North American professional home stager to be awarded the exclusive Luxury Staging Specialist designation. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you, Diane.
Very welcome. And we also have with us Kofi Nartey.
Hey.
Hey, Kofi.
How's it going?
Kofi is a lot of things. And first, Kofi is an Institute instructor. So thank you for that work that you do for the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. Kofi is a real estate professional in Los Angeles, specializing in the sports and entertainment market. And today we're going to talk about how these two very talented individuals bring a luxury home to market. Now, I want to take a minute or two to talk about what a luxury home is. So at the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing, we say that a luxury home is a listing or sale in the top 10% of your market. So in Los Angeles, where Kofi is sitting, that's a really expensive house. In Toronto, where Lori is, that is also a very expensive house.
Yes, it can be.
I believe both of these are approaching the $2 million mark in their areas. But in Dallas, Texas, where I live, that's $650,000 is the very base of the luxury market. So when we're talking today, I encourage everyone to think about all of the markets across North America and how they're somewhat the same and some are vastly different. But the idea of bringing a luxury home to market, to sell it as fast as we can, there's a lot of things that these two professionals do. So I want to take just a minute and give you the stage here to talk a bit about what you do, Lori.
Thanks, Diane. In our experience, one of the key factors that we have recognized, and to go back to your point, is in order to identify a luxury property, we have found that generally the rule of thumb would be that it would be 3 times the average price in that area. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if an area has an average home price of $900,000 as their posted average, then 2.7 would be the luxury threshold.
And the Institute uses 10%. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that helps to identify, and also the discerning factors of the home that separated into lifestyle, the lifestyle elements of the home, differentiate it from other properties.
Kofi, how do you think about luxury?
I think it's all contextual. So I think, again, for the Institute's purposes, it's the top 10% of the market. I also think there's alignment between luxury lifestyle, the expectations of the client, the expectations of the buyer, the way they're going to live there, and the property itself and how it delivers on that.
Right. So today, what's the expectation among the affluent when they walk through a home and they're actually a buyer? They're out looking for a home. What do you see?
I think in our market, it's a tale of many markets. I always say that. So
Sure.
it's different in each market, each city, and so forth. But right now, we're seeing a lot of buyers looking for move-in ready. Whereas if we rewound, say, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 9 years ago, people were willing to take on fixtures a lot more so, and put their finishing touches on it than they are now. Now, things like staging are more important than ever because somebody wants to walk into it, bring their toothbrush, sit down and be at home. And the competition is also stiffer. The buyers are more discerning. And so it's a lot harder to capture people immediately when they walk into a property.
Kofi, why do you think that changed? What changed in your mind, like as an observer of people and buyers and sellers? Why did we go in this direction?
Well, I just had a funny thought. I think there's a lot of reality TV that affects and impacts it impacts our industry, right? So you watch HGTV, you watch Property Brothers, you watch Fix and Flip, whatever these shows are, and you think you can do it, right? What's the commercial? You know, I don't know how to build a house, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn or whatever. No, you can't watch HGTV and flip a house. And then people started doing it and saying, "Oh yeah, we'll take on a fixer," and it broke up marriages, it broke up relationships. That's the reality of it. So I think, you know, people are moving past that. The new affluence and the new luxury is time recaptured for life experiences, right? So if you're losing part of your life experiences because of a flip that has dragged on or ruined your
not
relationship,
even a flip, just taking on something
a fixer,
that's
a renovation. So now people are, you know, they don't have as much time. They value their time differently. There are fewer people who want to take on that time and expense of renovating a property. So, you know, they're looking for these move-in ready products.
Yeah. So the media has created a bit
it's definitely
of this
part
on
of
both sides, right? Because this idea that every home has, you know, is ready to move into is also not reality.
Right. Exactly.
Right? The non-reality television.
Right.
I think we're also in a culture of instant gratification. Everything is at our fingertips. Technology is at the ready. We have images coming at us in the media, Instagram, all sorts of places. Everything is so fast and so instant. So the concept of waiting 6 months to have a home ready for you is just unthinkable sometimes. So, and to Kofi's point, you know, these luxury properties are not always the buyer's primary residence. They often have multiple properties in different cities, different locations around the world. So the fact that they just want to get there and to be there and not necessarily spend a lot of time getting it ready for them.
So you both work with sellers. Can you kind of walk through what that's like in trying to convince, short of role playing and that I would be the seller, but how do you convince folks that this is really what's happening and why they have to change out that carpet or paint that room?
I think we have the advantage of market statistics.
Okay.
And, you know, someone like myself, like I build rapport with people very easily. So I go in, I build rapport, but rapport is not enough to convince them to price their home effectively. So I have to come in with the stats. I have to show the market trends. And it happened in real time just in last year. Last year, you know, I had one property that came on. We got caught in a market shift. Average days on market is 28 days on market. We were approaching 80-something days on market. So the next listing we took in the same neighborhood, we showed them those exact trend lines over the past 3 months. We priced it more effectively. They were reasonable. They said, okay, yes, we understand. We see it because we showed them the numbers. And we went into escrow literally in 3 days, right? Now, this is real life.
Yes.
So it fell out of escrow. It fell out of escrow. A week later, it was in escrow again, and we were able to close it. But I mean, that just shows you it went into escrow very quickly each time because we were priced more effectively in front of the market.
And priced reflecting what was the house like? That specific one, was it ready? Was it staged?
It was ready. It was ready. And this one, we called it partial staging.
Okay.
Where we're able to utilize some of the owner's things and then bring in some new accent pieces to freshen it up. There was a single person living there. There wasn't much wear and tear. It was pretty, you know, show ready in general. But staging, as we talk about even in our trainings, you know, how we sell a home and how we live in a home are two different things. So getting it ready for the market was a little bit different.
So in this idea of getting it ready for the market, Lori, tell us about the role that the stager plays early, just really early.
I think the earlier the stager is involved in the marketing process with the realtor, the better the end result will be. Sometimes it's difficult if sellers maybe have to learn the hard way. If they've been on the market for an extended period of time, maybe they turn down the idea of staging initially, but now they've learned that they don't have positive feedback on their home and what can they do now to fix it. So it's unfortunate sometimes when we do have that kind of a scenario. So it is always better. You have one chance at a first impression. So it's always better to come out of the gate strong and put your best product forward to achieve the right result right away.
So how often in your experience, how often do the sellers get it right away versus after what you described?
I think it's improving. I think it is totally a reflection of relationship. And that trust.
I think another thing too, this is where reality TV redeems itself as well, right? Because people
Redemption.
they're familiar with staging now because
Yes.
of it as well. So that helps us as well. It helps the cause. And then having someone like Lori who can be that third party voice, because sometimes you have to have good cop, bad cop.
Sure.
Right.
Yes,
and so when
absolutely.
you have someone, you've built the rapport, you've gotten them to your price, and now you have to talk about staging, and it's going to be another blow. I like having that third party voice come in and be able to say, listen, we have to declutter, we have to remove these things, we have to take all these pictures down, we have to do all these things to get ready for the house to appeal to a broader audience of people. And sometimes it's really effective to have that voice come in.
I think it also depends on where they are in their decision-making process. If they have found their next dream home, they're excited about it, and they're ready, then mentally they've detached already from their current residence,
Right.
and they're ready to let it go. And they're more apt to move forward at a better pace.
Right.
If perhaps there's a negative situation, there could be a breakup of a relationship or an illness, and they don't know where they're going yet, they don't know what's next for them, that's really difficult. And there's a lot of resistance at that point, and sometimes it's much harder to get the buy-in from them and to get the process moving.
So, Lori, you have actually a service that's a consultation.
Yes.
Can you kind of walk us through that?
Okay. So we do go in, the realtors invite us into, or have it as part of their listing package, that we do go into every listing for them. And in that meeting, we sit down with the sellers and we do show them some of our statistics and some of the results of some success stories that have happened. And this gives them a little confidence, and this gives them a little bit of assurance that we are there to provide them with the best result possible. That is our main goal. In the shortest amount of time, obviously. So we first build their trust and the rapport, and then we explain the process to them a little bit, and then we give them some time. We leave them with our portfolio and our shiny books and all of these great things, and then we go and we assess the home room by room, and we're off usually for at least an hour or so, and just give them some time to process, some time to think. Sometimes if the realtor is in the room or at the meeting as well, that's more time for them to dialogue and work through things. And then after we've done our home assessment, we come back with our recommendations.
And are you presenting those to the seller or to the agent?
Seller?
Okay.
To the seller.
It's great.
Always best if the seller is vested in the process and in the preparations, then they are more apt to respond to potential offers or activity.
Can I ask you a question, Lori?
For sure.
Are you showing up on the first appointment with the agent, or is it usually a follow-up appointment?
That sometimes depends on the agent, and sometimes the agent knows best depending on the client.
Right.
For in the luxury market, oftentimes you don't have access to these people
All the time.
often.
Yeah.
So if the realtor has audience with them, then they bring me in and we've got to get this done quickly. We only have one chance to meet with these people.
Right.
If it's maybe more of a situation where it's kid gloves and they need to slowly work the seller into the comfort zone, then sometimes it's a second appointment. But I'm happy to go. Often it's the listing presentation.
I think it's something to pause and point out, like especially to the agents that we're speaking to for this, right? It's a value add. It's a huge value add. Because I remember when I first started, I didn't have a team, and having a title rep come with me to at least present like I had a team who was going to help me sit open houses was amazing. So to have someone who has experience dealing with luxury clientele, with luxury properties, her materials might be sexier than yours. Why not have somebody who's at the table presenting this as part of your team? I think it's a great value add, and it's something that agents should think about even as coming to the table to compete with other luxury agents in their marketplace.
There's a big wide opening here for a question, and that is, tell me about your designation, right? I'm not sure everyone understands that.
Okay. There are multiple designations. There's multiple certifications across the country, across North America for professional staging training. I feel blessed to have fallen under the CSP staging training program. It was one of the first and early programs in the market, and they are the first to create this luxury staging specialist designation. So found it a huge honor and a huge compliment to be awarded the designation. And I found it's really allowed me to step into some different properties, some different spaces, some different opportunities, and definitely given us a level of expertise and professionalism.
Great. And so are you ever found independent of an agent, or is your networking mostly with agents?
Agents are definitely a key source of leads for us, but it works in a reciprocal arrangement as well. So if sellers are thinking about selling their home, they have not yet decided on a realtor, they just want to think about what kind of preparations they need to do first, oftentimes they will reach out to us and find us, and then we have the pleasure of being able to recommend some of our top realtors for them. So we do bring quite a bit of business to our top realtors.
That's great. Kofi, you work with professional stagers. How does that relationship work for you?
Great. It's a great relationship to have. Like I said, it's an extension of our team. And if you can establish rapport with the stagers as well, they also get to know how you like to work. And I think it's an early conversation to have with assessing a property and figuring out who the target audience is for that property. We talk about it in the Institute training with photographers of telling them who the target market is so they can capture the property in that way. It's the same thing with staging as well, where we can say, this is probably gonna appeal to a family, or in this neighborhood, people work from home, so we need a nook where they can do their work, right? So we're on the same page in terms of the angle or even accents for the staging to appeal to that broader audience of buyers that we think it's gonna sell to.
So when you're actually performing the act of staging, you've already gone through Lori and said, here's the target, right? Can you talk about that?
We do some research together with the realtors and also on our own as to who the target market likely is culturally, socially, locally. Are they local? Are they international? And we need to know all of those factors because it does influence our design choices, some of the materials or the decor or even artwork that we would bring in. In certain areas, we don't want to offend anybody, so everything is very neutral and very abstract. Yet in some areas, for instance, if you have a funky loft in a very artistic neighborhood, you need to bring something a little bit saucy or a little bit provocative or a little bit memorable to relate to that person who's going to bite down on the house.
So I think we've established that there's absolutely a need to stage, okay? And, Kofi, in our discussions about this, you talk about reverse engineering and how that plays a role in what's happening in the market today. You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, you start with identifying who that buyer is, and then you reverse engineer how you're going to reach that buyer. Right. So you look at how do you create an environment in the home with the stager that you're working with that someone walks in and sees themselves living there. And so that's something that involves the conversations, it involves the research, it involves understanding that specific marketplace and then getting it dialed in. It made me think about some of the developers we work with. We work with developers as well. And when they're bringing a new product to market, whether it's a luxury condo building or rentals, that's one of the first things that they do is they get very specific in identifying the buyers. They'll say, this is Tom. Tom is 37. He works at a startup. He sold his car 2 years ago and now just uses Uber and Lyft and has a scooter. He eats fresh greens. And so you have this really target demographic.
Very clear.
Very, very clear, right? And it makes your job easier too in identifying how you're going to stage the property.
So Lori talked a bit about the perfect situation where in an ideal world, the seller has found their dream home. And suddenly you're the expert, right? There's no convincing needed. What about the situation where a house has been sitting and the idea that a house sells in 3 days and all of that, and once somebody's friend tells them that their house sold in 3 days, they want to know why theirs hasn't. What are in both of your minds, because you're going to see things differently and probably come together, but what in your mind is the single reason why a home sits in a good neighborhood, in a good house? Why is it not selling?
I think it's all about the feeling. I think you have to create the opportunity for that rush, that emotional connection, that wow.
I agree with that. I think, we look at sort of this mental checklist of things that contribute to the sale of a property. The condition of the property, the marketing, price being a huge factor, the staging, excuse me. And if any of these things are missing, that's where we try to start and check a box that has not been checked, and trying to assess why a property isn't moving, why it's not selling. And normally we get a lot of feedback, the early either pre-marketing launch, or we bring agents in to help us, assess the property. We get common threads of feedback that can help us adjust prior to hitting the market. So it can be everything from, oh, this show's a little tired, or it looks like there's deferred maintenance, or it's a little bland, or, oh God, there's too many colors, just things like that that can help us shift.
Let's also talk about possibly the idea or the situation where it could be vacant. A lot of people think, oh, it's right on the beach, or it's got a beautiful view and it's spacious. We can leave it empty. People will see that. That's a missed opportunity to get people to emotionally connect, for sure. Nobody really feels anything when they walk into an empty white box of a space.
And so what's driving that? Is it the seller just not wanting to spend the money?
Sometimes that, there are a lot of companies now that have programs that will front the cost for staging.
Yes.
So that's helped make the decision a little bit easier. But they have to see it as an investment in getting their property sold faster, more efficiently, and often for more money, right? It's, we try to paint pictures and give stories and examples. I always say you have to have 5 ways to say the same thing, because some people you can just tell them and they do it. Some people you tell them twice in the exact same words and they'll do it. The 3rd time you have to change it up. The 4th time you have to bring a picture. The 5th time there's a video example and a story of someone else who didn't do it and it didn't work out, and here's why.
Yes.
And I think when you paint those pictures for people, one of those will resonate with them. But yeah, there's sometimes there's resistance up front.
How often do you pull that out? This idea of, because it's a gentle thing you have to do when you say, see, this didn't sell.
Right.
And, you're kind of telling them their baby's ugly.
What I do is, and I never said it like this, but just to give you an example, if I said, Diane, put your hand out. Is it okay if I smack your hand? Not too hard. I'm just going to smack it. You might say, okay. That's exactly how I go into the conversation. I say, is it okay if I shoot straight with you about your place? So you set the stage for either bad news, some challenging information, some disheartening information, and you make it okay to deliver that information. And I say that we're on the same page. Like I always tell people, this is going to be our circle of trust. So we have to talk about the things that are good, the things that are bad, so we can come up with the objection handlers together. Is it okay if I shoot straight with you about the condition of the house? Sure, go ahead. And they might cross their arms before you even start talking. So you're up against a little resistance, but at least you've asked for permission.
Sure.
And I always sort of bookend it by saying, well, this is how we can address that. Right?
Always
Here are the
provide a
challenges.
solution.
And we provide the solution on the back end, for sure.
So the word that comes to my mind as I think about, bringing a luxury home to market, so there's this kind of feeling that agents typically have that, luxury's hard because homes sit for a really long time. What you all are describing is more curated, right? Very thoughtful about, don't just put the house on the market. Do you do coming soons? Like what do you do? What other types of strategies do you employ to build up that desire so that when it's unveiled, right. You've curated this property. Now people have been waiting for it.
Right.
How are you doing
I
that?
remember one of the talks that I gave, I think it was in one of the trainings, I gave the example of getting ready for the prom, right? Or getting ready for the ball. And I was like, you're not going to show up in your Spanx. You're not.
Hey, we don't wear those.
Hey, listen, they have Spanx for men right now.
That's true.
If this were a video, hey, there's a video going, I might,
You got Spanx on.
hey, I got Spanx on. No, but seriously, right? So certain things you just don't want to show half-baked. And you have that one chance to make a first impression.
Right.
And you want to have everything dialed in to what Lori was speaking to earlier about an emotional response, right? It's something that we talk about quite a bit. And we kind of, we park that right against, logical action and a logical response, but it's emotional first.
Mm-hmm.
It's emotional first. So how do we create that emotional response? And that's everything from, visual cues to sense, to how you feel in the space, the lighting in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all things that you want to get right. And we talk about even the lifestyle and the other aspects of their lives that are comparable to their home buying experience, right?
Okay.
So, we even say when they're choosing an agent, we talk about this in the training about how we're being compared to other luxury level experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're going to the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton, what's that experience like? When they're walking into this luxury property, what's the feeling like? What's the experience like? What's it visually doing for them?
The property can tick off all the boxes on their checklist. It could be in the right location. It could have exactly the number of bedrooms they need and the number of car spaces and everything. But if it doesn't have that indescribable, intangible feeling, they will not buy it.
It's like love.
Is it?
right.
I used to always say it's
Swipe
like love.
left.
It's like love. You have this checklist of things you want in a person.
Yeah.
And that last thing is that part you can't describe. It's like, it's just something
Absolutely.
about her.
That's a great analogy.
Great. So
You didn't know this was that kind of a podcast,
We
did you?
didn't. So the thing that comes to my mind as I listen to both of you, these are not people buying their first homes, and if they are, they've bought so many other things that they're so discerning up to this point. And one of the things we teach is that these aren't need buyers; these are want buyers. And so, what role does staging play in that? And I would ask you from the curb, right? So when this idea of they've now pulled up, how do you control that?
I think that you're touching on all the right things, right? So it's what's the approach? What's the curb appeal? What's the experience of coming to the property? Because this is the experience that their guests are going to have, that their friends are going to have when they're hosting dinner parties. What's that going to be like? It's part of the reason that as agents, we don't park in the driveway. We want them to pull into the driveway. If there's a gate, I tell the other agent, make sure it's closed when we get there so they can see the gate open. This is all part of the experience. And then the outside, the manicured yard, the paint on the house, everything has to be dialed in because it sets the tone. It sets the tone. And that initial sort of emotional response is the strongest, most defensible emotion, that will carry through the rest of the experience if you get it right.
They have made this appointment for this private showing because on paper, this home fits their needs. They're okay with the price. It fits all their needs. It checks all their boxes. What they're trying to do in the showing is to have all of their hopes and aspirations for this property be affirmed, right? So when they're walking up there, it just has to give back to them exactly what they're hoping for in order to secure the sale.
That's great. That's really well said. And so if we switch gears just a little bit and let's talk about the marketing of the property, right? The idea that you're now taking photographs, you're using video. So moving from staging, the house is now staged and it's staged well. The process now of the photography and the video, and really, what role do you both play in that? You hire, but then what?
We are still a big part of that process because we have to make sure that the messaging and that target audience that we're going after, the messaging is captured to resonate with that target audience, right? I have something that it's like our proprietary, it's part of our secret sauce, but we're friends, so I'll share it with you.
Right now.
Even in our presentations, we have what we call the Nartey ACE process, ACE, where we assess, capture, and execute, right? So now you're talking about capturing. Capturing is through photos, it's through videos. We've already assessed the value of the property, target audience, and so forth. Now we're capturing it. And that's where these conversations still come into play of how are we going to capture this in a way that resonates with the target buyer? How are we going to give a description that, again, captures the target buyer that we're going after? What should the brochures look like? What should the hero shot be? How do we capture part of the lifestyle? And, lastly on it, I think even with photography, it's easy to capture a property. It's hard to capture the essence of a property. So I have photographers that I use a lot, and I tell them, capture the property, but give me a lifestyle shot. Give me something that evokes the emotion that we talked about that'll resonate with the buyers that we're going after. Sometimes
we bring in different levels of photography. So yes, we will need the overall real estate photography for the gallery shots, for, the 30 MLS photos that we need. Sometimes we bring in an interior specialist who's used to shooting editorial style shots for magazines and things like that. And that's how you get some of those hero shots that can be, if you get 5 or 6 of those hero shots, those can be the shots that actually sell the house. And the real estate shots are the ones that back it up. You also have the opportunity of lifestyle videos. I mean, people do real videos with actors and human element, so that they can see and they can display, what it really would be like to live here.
So Kofi, you recently had a pretty large estate, and you did an extensive video on that property. How many days did that take? I mean, just curiously, like what are we looking at here for commitment?
Yeah, so we had a 2-day shoot, so it wasn't terrible.
Right.
It wasn't terrible. It was a good one though, and we went through the whole process of staging the property, coming in, having the conversation with the staging company on capturing, as it was a luxury home, capturing the essence of the property, but also having the staging reflect the level of the home, the style of the home, and the target buyers. And you brought up a great point too, because we brought in a photographer that we don't use for every shoot, but they shoot interiors for some of the luxury travel magazines. And we wanted that for this specific property.
Absolutely.
And so we brought
Destination
in, exactly. So we brought in that photographer to capture it, the drone shots as well, the twilight shots as well. All of these things, capture the imagination of the buyers, capture the emotion of the buyers, as well as sort of the fly-through videos as well.
And so your strategy here is to show the potential buyer, the target, if you will. Did you hold anything back? Like how are you going to get them into the property?
I think it's property specific. It comes up when we talk about things like Matterport, right? Yeah. So Matterport's something that to me is hit or miss. It's very cool if a property has no excuses, right? Or you can spin the camera around in every direction and everything is dialed in. But if the view from that side is terrible, it's a brick wall, then matter not, not Matterport, right? So I think, and I've taken over listings too, where they had 75 pictures on the MLS and we, curated it down to 12 because they were showing too much of the property. And like we talked about, that pulling up to the property and getting that first impression, some of the photos have a strong enough first impression that will get them there. And even the property itself has a strong enough curb appeal or some dynamic feature that will, capture the buyer's attention. And it's funny because the buyer will then make excuses for the other parts that don't quite measure up.
Sure.
Right? It's just like when you fall in love with somebody, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, all these weaknesses start to come to, we're talking about love again.
Here we go.
Back to love again. So stay down. But seriously, you have excuses for the parts that don't quite measure up because you love that one thing about it. And I think we can capture that in the properties as well.
Well, you bring up a strategy. Go ahead, Laura.
We see that all the time.
With
for
love
instance,
or with houses?
Yeah, he's going back. He's not going to get off that.
Okay.
Again, back to people's list, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
They can all of a sudden be shown a house and it only hits half of the items on the list, but they have the feeling.
Right.
And they're excited about it. And it's like, well, what are we going to, the kids can sleep together. They can have we can do bunk beds. We can do this. We can do that. Like they find ways around it.
We can give the kids away.
We can give the kids away.
They can stay at grandma's. That's fine.
That's great.
Absolutely. So sometimes the feeling that they achieve overrides what they thought was so important to them.
Well, and you bring up an entire category that I think we should talk about, which is really the harder homes, right? There's a handful of perfect homes, right? And with Lori's expertise in Kofi marketing, there's, wow, right? It's going to be great. But the house that looks at the brick wall or that's on a busy street, how do you use staging and other tools to make up for that? Because there's a buyer, right? There's a lid for every pot. There's a buyer for every house.
Sometimes what I find is if you take that negative and embrace it and turn it into something notable about the house. For instance, there was a condo that overlooked a cemetery in Toronto. And from the looks of the patio, it did look like almost like Central Park. It was all greenery and it was trees and it was beautiful. But when people looked at it on the map, it was backing right onto the cemetery.
Sure.
So we kind of we just went with it.
Yeah.
So we put up a huge artwork it had huge tall ceilings. And so this was like a 10 by 10 piece of artwork. And it was literally a negative of an x-ray of a skull.
Just went for it.
Wow. That's
So
awesome.
So, there are people who like to be rebellious. There are people that like to be edgy. And so when they saw that condo, it was the one with the skull.
Yes.
Right? Let's get that one.
That's awesome.
Right.
And it worked.
I love
so
it.
sometimes you have to take a risk.
That
and you
takes
just have
principle of sacrifice to a whole new level,
Whole nother
doesn't
level.
it?
Whole nother level.
So on that, right? So what we're talking about, that's a great story, and we teach the principle of sacrifice because so often the obvious is too hard to look at or too difficult to explain away.
Right.
And this idea of being creative. Have you got any stories about that, Kofi? Like because that's terrific. I've not heard that before. Let's just go with the cemetery.
I think, it's funny because I've been in real estate for 17 years. I was introduced to the Institute much later than I wish I had been because I love the training. I think it accelerates people's growth curve in this career.
So especially when you're training, right?
Especially when I'm training, I get to hear everyone's stories from around the country. But there's an example that we taught in class about a lakefront home, and the lake had dried up.
Yep.
And the agent got creative and had a catchy headline: "Buy before the rains return."
Right.
The price is going to rise faster than the level of the
water,
lake.
yes.
Right. And I had that same scenario 2 years before, and I was like, I wish I had that headline. The same neighborhood where we just staged this home. I was telling you, we staged a home and did all this great photography. I sold another home in that neighborhood. It's LaDainian Tomlinson's home. He's a football player. I can say it because it was public information. And he asked for help selling his house on Lake Travis. And the lake had dried up in Texas,
Welcome
and
to
this
Texas.
comes into collaboration, which I think we'll talk about in another one of our conversations. But I collaborated with an agent there. We listed the property, and the lake was dry, had a boat slip and everything, and that's a tough one. But it's the same thing if you look at homes that are across the street from construction, for example. Once that construction's done, and you now have access to Whole Foods, your value is going to go up. So if you can endure the 10 to 12 months of construction, right, you're going to see an increase in value. Same thing with the lake. When the water is returned, the value went up. So it's a chance sometimes to embrace the challenge of what's there.
So, it's probably a topic for another podcast, but the idea of bringing a tough to sell home to market.
Absolutely.
Right. But because what percentage, just in your experience, what percentage of homes are really fabulous that you've listed?
Really fabulous. I would say I've been fortunate. I'd say maybe 70%.
That's good.
Are pretty fabulous.
That's good.
Yeah, 60 to 70% are pretty fabulous.
That's
in
because
their
you
own
live
way.
in LA.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
in their own way.
We have to make them fabulous.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's part of the process.
yeah.
We hire
so
people
Lori,
like Lori.
tell us a transformation story.
Okay. Well, I think one of the major things that we have to, and just to finish what we were speaking of before, is when there is a negative in a property, don't hide it, because that'll just undermine trust, undermine respect, and lose the opportunity. I think it's important to, if there is an issue with a property, just face it head on, provide a solution and a workaround, and work with it that way. Again, there was a property that had been on the market for 18 months. It was huge and cavernous and marble everything. And the previous owner was very much into medieval warfare kind of art. So it was very masculine, very negative, even the curtain rods had daggers on the ends of them and things. It was excellent. Like just not very warm and welcoming, let's put it that way. So, and surprise, it didn't sell.
Right.
So at that point, we were blessed and fortunate that they understood, they had learned the hard way, and they had understood that they need to neutralize this home and warm it up. So we brought in a huge truckload of live trees, 8 to 10 foot trees, because they had 12-foot ceilings. So these are the big ones that you see in Veranda magazine and things like that. So we brought in huge trees, lots of life, lots of greenery, and then lots of softness and textures. So added carpets and pillows and softness. And we were luckily, the home sold in 3 weeks.
Nice.
By a foreign buyer with a single wire transfer, 5-day closing.
Amazing.
Fully furnished.
And found it online.
They saw the photos online once it was remarketed, rephotographed, drone videos, and remarketed.
And the biggest thing you did in that situation was the plants, you think?
No, I think it was the overall.
Okay.
We created a feeling. We created a lifestyle for them.
That's really, not the lifestyle of the daggers.
Right.
I'm not going to forget that for quite some time now. I'm just saying. So in the world of how people operate today, right? The Instagram moments that people want. I mean, that's just really what's driving this, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, they think everything is perfect. Everything is glamorous. Everybody lives in a fancy, gorgeous house. And so that's what people's expectations are when they're looking for their dream home.
Well, this we do have another topic that we've just uncovered, which is the tough homes. But I don't know that I've ever heard the skull story, and you need to use that the next time you're
Definitely
because that's pretty incredible. Any final thoughts on? Lori, this is what you do every day of your life, right? You have a different seat than Kofi has in this idea of what your relationship is with the real estate professional.
I'm excited that realtors are starting to see us as their marketing partner and a key to their success rather than a line item on the costs of their listing. We love to be seen as definitely instrumental in achieving a high sale and a quick sale. Repeat business is the ultimate compliment. When we have realtors who will not take a listing, if the homeowners will not engage in preparations and staging, then that just speaks volumes, and it's such an honor to work with
That's a great boundary to have. I mean, I think this education of the seller, right? Being able to get folks to understand that they may not have what they think they have. And even if it is the greatest thing for them, it may not be for the next person. Think the dagger guy, right?
It might have been perfect for them,
yeah,
but it needs to now be perfect for a wider audience if we're going to attract some attention to the property.
How about you, Kofi? Any kind of final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's great to have a team, and I think that staging is a critical part of the team and a critical part of the process. And it's certain things are just true no matter what industry or no matter what product or service you're presenting. It's really capturing the essence of that brand, of that product, of that home, and carrying it through the preparation, the marketing, and the sale of the product, good, service, or home, right? And I think that staging is a critical part of that. Photography is a critical part of that. The messaging, the brochures, the flyers. I mean, all the things that we cover in the course, but it's all part of this package to sell luxury properties.
That's good. Well, thank you both for your time. It was really enjoyable.
This is good.
And I appreciate it.
Thanks, Diane.
Dating show next time.
Dating.
This is
Love.
Thanks, Diane.
This content is brought to you in part by Supreme Auctions, the only luxury auction company recommended by the Institute. Supreme Auctions is widely recognized as the first auction company to design a program to work alongside and in partnership with luxury real estate professionals and their clients. Go to supremeauctions.com to learn more.